We are very pleased to have Michaela Walker here with us. Michaela graduated from Pittsburgh State University in 2016 with a Bachelor of Science in Biology and minors in Chemistry. Currently, he works as a Research Project Manager with the Neuromuscular Research Division in the Department of Neurology at the University of Kansas Medical Center. She also serves as the lead research manager for the FSHD Clinical Trial Research Network and is managing the MOVE and the Resolve FSHD studies. She believes strongly about patient education, advocacy, and is working to better the care and therapies that are available to patients. I've had the pleasure of meeting Michaela a couple times, and she's always been very generous with her time and her knowledge and advocating for pediatric FSHD. So thank you so much, Michaela, for joining us tonight and this evening, probably after a long day of work. So thank you so much for being here with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate that you guys invited me. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So really what I'm here to talk to you about today in particular is the MOVE FSHD study, and that's because it's the only study that's actually recruiting pediatric patients at this point in time. So that's what I'm really here to talk to you guys about today. And then if you have other questions about other clinical trials, we can definitely go over that after as well. So the overall study is called Motor Outcomes to Validate Evaluations in FSHD, and we just call it MOVE FSHD. And again, I'm Michaela Walker. I'm a research project manager at KU Medical Center in Kansas City, and I'm also the lead project manager for the FSHD Clinical Trial Research Network in all of the studies that run on our network. So a little bit of background. So I know obviously you guys know a lot about FSHD, but it is caused by the expression of a normally silenced gene called DUX4. And this expression actually causes a toxic gain of function. And that's what actually causes the disease, is this DUX4. FSHD is a dominantly inherited, slowly progressive muscular dystrophy, and it's very variable between individuals. It can even be individuals with the same mutation within generations of family, or even just the same individual from one side of the body to the other can look really different. The MOVE study was really to allow us to follow participants from a previous natural history study we did called Resolve. That started back in 2016. And so the MOVE study was originally meant to let these patients go over into another study so that we could continue to follow them over time. But then we also wanted to make sure that we were including other individuals with the FSHD that we didn't include in our first study. And that includes those that have FSHD type 2, pediatric patients who have FSHD, and also maybe those who are in a wheelchair. So overall, the rationale for our study was really to gain a better understanding of how baseline FSHD characteristics and motor performance would actually predict real-world outcome measures for anyone who has FSHD. And so this was really to help define clinically meaningful changes from patients, and then helping support drug registration and improving care delivery for individuals with FSHD. So really, we want to understand the disease, and we want to try to find out what might be predictive for some of these hard motor outcomes, like needing a wheelchair or orthotics, maybe needing a breathing machine. And then overall, we want to make sure that we're understanding what changes are important to you. So then when we go to people like the FDA, that we're able to support what you feel your changes are. And then we also want to make sure that we're actually improving the care for FSHD, because the standard of care for FSHD is really different depending on what site you might be going to get your clinical care. It's really not the same all across the country. So the primary goal of the MOVE study is to hasten therapeutic development and improve care delivery for FSHD. And we're going to do that by determining, again, the predictive value of some of these simple motor assessments and biomarkers on disease progression over time. So we're really trying to correlate hard outcomes, you know, when someone's needing to use an orthotic or a cane or a walker or a BiPAP or something like that. Okay, so it is a prospective observational study, which means that we are looking at you now and forward in time. And then we are including 450 FSHD patients in the study. So this will actually be the largest study ever done in FSHD once it's completely full, which is really exciting. There are 12 sites right now in the US, which you can see here on my map. And then there are 3 sites that are coming for Canada as well. And then we are actually opening 1 site in the UK. Patients are going to be followed for a minimum of at least 3 years, and we're going to see you at least once a year. And then again, as I haven't said this multiple times already, but we are thinking that simple motor measurements are going to predict motor milestones over time. So our overall study aims were to determine the rate of progression of FSHD, to determine the predictors of motor milestones. We're also going to look at some of like the key clinical characteristics like your genetic mutation, gender, age, education, and how that might be predictive as well. And then we are going to look at your performance on motor tasks and that baseline. We're also going to look at patient-reported disease impact over time, so how you or your children feel like they're changing since the last time we saw them. And then aim for, this is something that we added for a small pilot study. We wanted to see if we could do remote assessments in the home, basically so that you guys don't have to come and see us on site as often. So the inclusion and exclusion criteria. So who are we including in our study? Really, again, this study was meant to include everyone who has FSHD, but we do have a couple of things that we're looking for to make sure that you really have FSHD and not another muscular dystrophy. So you either have to have a genetic test, so genetically confirmed FSHD, it can be type 1 or type 2, or you need to have a clinical diagnosis with characteristic findings and another affected parent or offspring. So really, we just want to make sure that you have a clinical diagnosis and that someone else in your family has FSHD. That way we know you actually have FSHD and not another neuromuscular disease or another muscular dystrophy. And if you did our remote pilot study, you needed to have Wi-Fi in order to connect to Zoom. The only exclusion criteria is if you're, unwilling or unable to provide consent, or another medical condition, in the opinion of the investigator that wouldn't make you a good fit for our study. Not a lot of patients have really fallen into that category, but there is one patient at our site. She has a couple of neuromuscular diseases. So she has FSHD and then she has another neuromuscular disease. So we weren't able to include her in our study because we couldn't tell what her weakness was from. Was it due to FSHD or, this other disease or both? So that might be an example of someone who might not be a good fit. Okay, this is a very busy slide, but essentially these are what we're doing at each of our visits. So the study visits are completed at least once a year. The first thing that we'll do whenever you come to one of our sites is we'll go through the consent form. We'll actually have you consent to participate in the study. Then we'll collect your demographics, your medical history, the medications that you're taking. We'll also do different questionnaires. There's 6 questionnaires that we're collecting in the study. You'll do a physical exam with one of the study doctors. And then you do a lot of different strength, function, and breathing tests with a physical therapist. And then the saliva and the blood samples are optional for MOVE. Okay, the remote assessment pilot, I'm not going to go into this too much, but I just wanted you guys to know that it exists. So we did a really small pilot study with MOVE, and it was only 20 patients, 10 from KU and 10 from University of Rochester. And basically, we wanted to see if it was feasible to do some of the assessments we were doing in the clinic in the home. And then we wanted to see are the values that we were getting in the clinic also similar to the values that we were getting in the home? So we have patients come and enroll and do their first visit on site with us. And then 2 to 4 weeks after their on-site visit with us, we sent them a kit, just like in these pictures. And then we did a remote visit via Zoom. And then after that first remote visit, we did another one 2 to 4 weeks later as well. So basically we did 2 remote visits right after the first on-site visit. And really we did everything that we did in clinic, we tried to capture on that Zoom visit. And so now we just finished that last spring. So now we're analyzing the data to see if this is something that we could actually roll out across the study. Because it would be a lot more convenient, you know, not really just for us, but it'd be a lot more convenient for you guys if you could do some of these clinic visits actually from the home instead of traveling to see us. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and go into the MOVE Plus study. The MOVE study right now is enrolling children. MOVE Plus is essentially, it's a few extra assessments that we're doing. It's whole body MRI, muscle biopsy, and reachable workspace. Right now, it is not for kids, but we are like actively doing contracting with a couple of different parties who are wanting to sponsor MOVE Plus in children. So right now I'm just talking about adults, but we are getting ready to roll it out for the kiddos, and I'm hoping that this is going to be rolled out within the next 6 months. So I did want to talk about it today. So for the MOVE Plus sub-study, again, it's MOVE, but we're calling it MOVE Plus because there are a couple of additional things that we're collecting in these participants. So 200 of the 450 MOVE participants we're hoping are going to do this MOVE Plus sub-study. And it's the same sites, so the same 12 sites in the US, and there's 3 that will be in Canada. And we are collecting additional biomarkers. So that's the whole body MRI, the reachable workspace, and then we're also, we will still be collecting the blood and the saliva samples, and we will be doing a one-time muscle biopsy. So the overall aims of the MOVE Plus sub-study is to determine multi-site validity of whole body MRI as a biomarker in FSHD. So is MRI a good biomarker? To determine the most sensitive MRI criteria and also the most sensitive inclusion and exclusion criteria for studies, really also to help select for DUX4 related muscle activity. And then another aim was to determine the optimal set of DUX-related biomarker muscle targets, so making sure that we're identifying the best places to find DUX4 so that we can see a change in the muscle. And then to evaluate the relationship between MRI or plasma biomarker levels and progression. So the inclusion-exclusion criteria is a little bit different for MOVE Plus compared to regular MOVE, mainly because we want to make sure that it's safe for you to be able to do the MRI and the biopsy. That's mainly what most of this criteria is for. So you have to be enrolled in MOVE. So everyone has to be enrolled in MOVE. Right now, MOVE Plus, again, it's only for adults, but we are planning to include the kiddos, so that will be rolled out hopefully by the summer. You need to have some symptomatic lower limb weakness. We are actually changing this to just symptomatic limb weakness. We realized we might be a little picky about saying that we wanted people to have a little bit of lower limb weakness, so we are going to change that. We are asking that people are able to walk 30 feet without support of another person. So you can use orthotics, walking sticks, or canes, but not a walker or a scooter. And the reason for this is if you are still walking, theoretically, you still have enough muscle in your legs that we could safely biopsy it. If you're not walking, it probably isn't going to be safe for us to do a biopsy on your leg. And so that's really the reason for that criteria. We still want you in our study. We're not going to put you through the whole body MRI and the muscle biopsy because it probably isn't safe. And then again, the lower extremity muscle needs to be accessible for biopsy. So there has to be enough muscle there for us to be able to take a biopsy. And we do anticipate that 60% of you, so a little bit more than half, are going to meet STIR positive criteria. What we think that means is we think that STIR positivity is showing active FSH disease happening in the muscle. That's our hypothesis. That's what we're thinking. So we're taking this whole body MRI. You might show up STIR positive in certain muscles. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take a biopsy of that STIR positive area. And then we're going to see is what we're seeing in the MRI really happening with what's actually happening in the muscle? So that's what we're trying to look at is the MRI actually showing active disease? And then when we take a little piece of muscle from that area, are we actually seeing a lot more DUX4 there? So that's really what we're looking at. Okay, exclusion criteria. These ones are a little bit lengthy. Again, really this is all mainly safety related for the biopsy and the MRI. So unwilling or unable to provide informed consent, you wouldn't be able to be in our study. The second one's probably a big one. So if you're taking an investigational drug or therapy, so if you're in the Fulcrum study or Avidity or something like that, we will not be letting you do the Move Plus study. We don't really want to do whole body MRI or muscle biopsies in people that we know are taking an investigational therapy, because it'll kind of totally throw off the data. You probably won't look like others that have FSHD that aren't taking something. If you have severe cardiac, respiratory, or orthopedic conditions that, it wouldn't be safe for us to do some of these procedures. If you're on an anticoagulant, such as like warfarin or something like that, it won't be safe for us to do the biopsy on you. We do not want you to bleed out on the table. Other exclusion criteria, so malignancy. So if you have cancer and you're actively getting chemo or other anabolic therapies for your cancer treatments, we would exclude you. If you're on immunosuppressants, so if you're on prednisone, not very many FSHD patients are, but if you are on prednisone, we would exclude you. And if you've taken it within 6 months, that's mainly so that you don't get an infection from the biopsy. Pregnant or planning to become pregnant within 12 months. So we don't like to do MRIs, biopsies, or muscle strength testing on women who are pregnant. So they would be excluded. And then recent or ongoing infection, that would exclude you as well. And then the last two, if you have a contraindication to the MRI, like you have a pacemaker, a fake eye, an aneurysm clip, something that isn't compatible with the MRI, you would be excluded. And then the last criteria is, in the opinion of your doctor, something would interfere with the study and you wouldn't be a good candidate. So really the overall inclusion-exclusion criteria is mainly safety related as far as who's included for the study. Okay, this is the schedule for the Move Plus sub-study. So we will still see you, once a year. There are basically about 20% of our cohort we're going to be having come back for a 4-month visit just to do a biopsy. We're just wanting to look at and see if there's really a big change between in 4 months' time. So we are having a few patients come in, 40 out of our 200 for that 4-month biopsy. So the study visits, we're still going to collect, it's Move plus a few procedures. So we're still going to collect your medical history, your medications, the demographic information. You're still going to have a physical with the doctor. We are going to collect your saliva for the Peter Jones test. We're going to collect blood samples. We're going to do different muscle function and breathing tests, questionnaires. You'll do the reachable workspace, the whole body MRI, and last but not least, you'll do the muscle biopsy. Okay, and full disclosure, this data is a little bit outdated. I didn't go pull some of the data from this month, so this data is a couple months old, but I just wanted to show you guys kind of where we're at in terms of recruitment. So these are all of our different sites. On the left, you can see how many patients they have per site in the study. And then on the right, you can just see all the different types of visits that have been completed. The blue bars are the first visits, and then the orange is the follow-up visits. So we've actually enrolled 238 of you into the study. So we have 238 patients participating, and we've had more than 100 of you come back for 1-year follow-up visits. This is just a little peep of like what it looks like right now for who's in the study. Right now, we are mainly male, which was slightly surprising to me because normally we're mainly female. But right now, there's about 58% men and 42% women in our study. We are mainly Caucasian, non-Hispanics. in our study. The age breakdown. So this is what I really wanted to talk to you guys about. As you can see, we are very heavily weighted on the adult side, and really we have a high enrollment between the ages of 35 to 75. And really where we're lagging on enrollment are the younger cohorts. So kiddos for sure, and then people in their 20s and 30s. Those are really the groups that we're not doing a great job of targeting or reaching at this point in time, which is why I'm here to talk to you guys today. So, like I said, this is a little bit old. So now we have 240 patients in the study. More than 100 have come back for their annual follow-up visit. We still have less than 15 kids in the entire study. So I'm wanting to see how I can get these kiddos involved. So that's what I'm here to kind of ask you about today. And then we have had more than 50 of our Resolve patients from the previous study. We have had more than 50 of them roll over into MOVE. And all of our sites in the US are still enrolling. So there are still slots at every single site. And then the Canadian sites, 2 of them should be up and running in March. And then the other one I'm hoping is going to be up and running right before summer. So my overall conclusions for the study is that the MOVE study addresses the barriers to clinical trials in FSHD by helping validate these motor, clinical, and patient-reported outcomes, as well as potential biomarkers. And this project, in that FSHD is the second most common muscular dystrophy, and the results of this study can have a direct impact on patient care, our understanding of the disease, and on the actual design of clinical trials. And then some of my future considerations. So we are looking for, more collaborators, more sites. We want to get more people involved. The second one is why I'm here today. We are hoping to expand the pediatric cohort in MOVE. I'm hoping to get about 75 to 80 slots dedicated just to pediatric patients. And I'm wanting to have them join MOVE Plus because we rolled out MOVE Plus for adults. And then Dr. Statlin and I were like, wow, why didn't we think about doing this in kids? This was like a complete oversight on our part. We should have thought about that earlier. So now we're looking at trying to add it for the kiddos. We're always looking into, are there additional things that we should be collecting that we're not collecting already? One of the things we've thought about adding is like a wearable device, like one of the watches that you can wear on your wrist or your ankle. We've also thought about allowing maybe for like asymptomatic individuals with FSHD to enroll in MOVE. We've thought about that as well, or even just healthy controls. So these are all kind of, things that we're actively thinking about and actively pursuing with our study, in particular, expanding the pediatric cohort and having them join MOVE Plus. So really, this is just a special shout out. Thank you to our study participants, because we cannot do any of this without you or people who are willing to participate in our study. And then I always say thank you to our study investigators, the clinical evaluators, and the coordinators who make this happen. And then the rest of it is just listing important people. So really that's kind of my overall. I'm like, and now we go to questions, and I'm like, Lee, I think I hit your, 12 or your 18-minute mark, maybe a little less.
Well done.
And I feel like I went really, really fast now that I've said that. I'm like, I probably kind of just sped read that.
And so, Michaela, I have a question for you. Maybe you can kind of elaborate on why it's so important to get pediatrics in the MOVE study. And also, can you explain, sort of in layman's term, what a biomarker is?
So maybe I'll start with the biomarker question, because that's maybe kind of an easier one. So a biomarker is just basically something in the body or something biological that we are looking at to track disease. So it can be blood samples can be considered biomarkers, saliva samples. Also, MRI can be considered a biomarker. So really, it's just a medical assessment or something that we're looking at in the body that's going to change. So for MRI, you might expect maybe the muscles to look different over time. For the muscle biopsy, you might expect, DUX4 to be changing throughout time, things like that. So that's what we mean when we say biomarker. It's something in the body that we're looking at that's going to be changing, that we can track.
And the reason why that's important is if you go into a clinical trial, then the placebo group would act like the natural history group, like the MOVE group or whatever. And the active ingredient group would act different. They wouldn't decline as much. And so then you can evaluate that your drug works, and then it can go to the FDA and then ultimately get to our families. So that's really why it's important to have one of those. And Michaela described what one of those is.
And then why it's so important for kids to join MOVE, and really just the MOVE study in general. So the MOVE study was meant to encompass all individuals who have FSHD. And it's important to have a study like that because pharma trials and industry trials normally collect a very certain type of person who has FSHD. So when a drug goes to get approved by the FDA, it's important to have a study that shows what the overall population looks like so that when that drug gets approved, it can get approved for everyone and not necessarily just the types of people who could participate in the study. And if you don't have a really large study that shows that really large, broad population of like, this is what FSHD looks like on the full spectrum, not just for that very selective group. If you don't have a study that's showing that, then sometimes the FDA won't approve it for everyone. They'll only approve it for the people who would have qualified for the trial. So it basically gives us as much ammunition as possible when we go to the FDA to get these therapies approved, and for also maybe like insurance companies and things like that, showing that we have this data, this is what this disease looks like, and it can kind of just show a broad spectrum. And the kiddos, why it's important in general is, I think we would all like to think if you treat earlier, you might have a better outcome. So that's why it's important, and what the kids are getting a little bit left behind right now, because in a lot of pharma trials, they always want to start in adults because they think that that's safer and it's less taboo to start in adults. But having a study like MOVE can show, we know how to measure things in kids, so then we can apply it to a real study, because that's another struggle is we're not sure that all of the stuff we've been doing in adults, we're not sure if it's really super appropriate for kids. So we want to make sure we're doing the right questionnaires and the right kind of strength and muscle testing so that when we have trials come down for kids, they're feasible and they're actually going to show that something's changing and happening. So that's really why it's important to get these kiddos involved, is because we want them to be able to have the therapies, because the thought is that if you get on a therapy, much earlier, you're hopefully going to have a much better outcome later in life because we were able to get it to you earlier, which we've seen that with Duchenne and SMA and things like that. Those kids normally do a lot better if you're able to treat them, when they're less than 5 years old, than if you're catching them later in life and some of that disease progression has already happened. And we're trying to get to a place where we can not only stop disease, but we can have regenerate, but we aren't to the point where we can do all of that yet. So really, we want to make sure that we can try to treat as early as possible so that we don't have the disease progress, because we're not to the point where we figured out how to reverse what's already happened, if that makes sense.
Perfect. Christina and Cheryl have a question. Christina, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. Michaela, you have a really nice way of explaining complicated things. So thank you for that. I live in California. I said that at the front. The closest for us, our caregivers are at Stanford, and they've been saying for close to a year that they're paused on recruiting. And I just wondered if you have any intel on how we kind of break through, or should we try and go somewhere else?
Nope. They are not really closed for recruitment. So basically what happened is we gave them initial money for their first 20 patients, and now they have funds to enroll another couple handfuls more of patients. So just keep banging down their door. And if it becomes a problem, just reach out to me, because they are to the point where they're ready to start enrolling new patients. Originally, each site was only supposed to enroll 20 patients, and Stanford hit that right away. Now we've given them more funds so that they can enroll more patients. So
Great.
that probably was true maybe when you first reach out, but now they do have more funds to be able to enroll. I think it's like another 9 patients.
Great. Okay. Thanks.
Can I follow
Michaela-
up that really quickly? I'm sorry. Michaela, can you let us know if you know who had paused and who's reopened?
And everyone's reopened. No one has paused. No one should have paused. So
Okay. Okay. I just thought we could maybe help with some clarity to our family.
because I'm like, technically every single site is open and every single site still has to enroll, including my site.
Okay.
So every single site still has slots.
Okay. Okay. Great.
So, Michaela, I had a parent who couldn't come here tonight, but reached out to me, and she tried to enroll her child at UCLA, and she says she's getting stonewalled, like they're not responding back to her. What should she do to get her child enrolled at UCLA?
Have her reach out to me, and then I will reach out to Perry Shea directly. That's the doctor there. So, because they are definitely not full. So I have a feeling it's probably just a staffing issue. Because everything right now, everyone is short-staffed, and in particular in healthcare, we are extremely short-staffed. But we can get her into the trial, and we can get her kiddo into the trial. So just send me their contact information, and I can get them directly in touch with the study doctor and with the study coordinator.
Yeah, thank you. All right, Cheryl, you had a question?
Yes. Let's see. I was just wondering, when you do the labs on the Move Plus, do you look at creatine levels? And the second question I had was, is there any concern about the validity of the results when you employ the remote kit where you don't go into the clinic?
Okay, so for the creatine, the simple answer is no. For that, that's not really what we're looking at. We're looking at other biomarkers. I hate to say, like, we're not really interested in creatine, because I'm sure we are, but that's not actually something that we're specifically looking at for the study,
Yeah.
or at
I just
least
hear
not that I'm
everybody-
aware of.
Yeah, I just hear everybody talking about their creatine levels. I don't understand it myself.
Guys
but it
have
works.
high CK and low creatine. That's just how muscular dystrophy goes.
Okay. So it's pretty
Is it-
standard.
Mhm.
Okay.
Or fairly standard. People with FSHD don't always have really high CK counts, so you probably won't always have really low creatine, depending on how your levels are. But if I saw that lab, I wouldn't be shocked, and I'm not a doctor, so. But yeah, I was like, that's pretty typical, is if you have a high CK count, then you're going to have a low creatine.
Okay.
But no, we are not looking at that for this study. And now I'm trying to remember what was the other question?
Yeah, I just said, is there any concern about the validity or authenticity when you employ the remote assessment tool?
Oh yes, for sure. And that's something we're looking at in our analysis. And that's why we did the on-site visit first, because basically they did everything on-site physically with us. And then 2 to 4 weeks later, we sent them the kit, we did everything. And then that's why we ended up doing a second remote visit. That way, if they kind of like learned or figured things out from the first visit, then we had a second visit to capture that. So that is actually something we're wanting to see is, and the preliminary data looked pretty good. Like, it looked pretty reliable and pretty replicable. But the question is, I mean, when you only have 20 patients at 2 sites, it can look pretty nice. I think the question is, what if we roll it out to all 15 of our sites with hundreds of patients? It might not look so pretty.
Yeah. I was just thinking from the point of view of like, not us looking at the results, but someone from the outside saying, okay, well, I don't know. There wasn't really someone on site to make sure they were doing everything right. And we're just relying on, them reporting it. And anyway, that's what I was kind of worried about more, that they would poo-poo that evidence.
Yeah. And I think we tried to so we recorded it. So it was a Zoom, just like we're doing now, but we also recorded the entire Zoom visit just so that we could go back. But that was definitely something that we had considered. But hopefully with how we've designed the trial, hopefully it will have valid data and will be pretty replicable.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be
Some-
great. Makes it so
Yeah.
much easier. Yeah.
And a lot of these pharma companies were really interested in like looking at remote visits. I don't know that it's ever going to completely replace you actually coming on site to see us, but maybe you could come see us less often.
Yeah.
Was kind of the hope behind that.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I had one more question. A lot of parents are reluctant to get their kids clinically diagnosed or genetically diagnosed because right now there's no treatment. But a lot of them have done the Jones spit test. And you mentioned that you guys collect saliva and you send it to the Jones lab.
Yep.
Is there anything in the future where maybe you can take the Jones spit test and that will qualify them for the MOVE study rather than them having to get genetically or clinically diagnosed?
I hope so, but the reason why we're not taking it now is because we're helping to validate them. So like we can't say, yes, you have FSHD from the Jones spit test and then have you spit in a tube and say, but we're also validating the spit test in this study with the Jones lab. So what if the Jones lab test gets validated or something of that nature, then we could let it count as the genetic test. But since we have it in our study to help them validate it, we can't have it count as their genetic test now. But I hope that that will change because I would much rather spit in a tube than have my arm poked for sure.
And you mentioned that there's a new pediatric study. Can you expand on that? Like,
really just adding Move Plus for kids. So I'm trying to expand the current Move study to actually make it truly for kids, because originally it kind of started as an adult study and we were just letting kids enroll. I'm wanting to make sure that we actually tailor the MOVE study to actual pediatric assessments for FSHD. So we're working with the Australian group in Melbourne on their PEDS-COM for FSHD. And then also we're going to add actual questionnaires that are meant for kids. Right now, the questionnaires that we've been doing are really meant for adults, and they do okay with kids, especially teenagers, but I'm thinking anyone under 10, they might not be so applicable. So I want to make sure that we're actually doing and collecting things that are appropriate for kids.
So this is part of the $3 or $4 million that of a pediatric study I was talking to Dr. Statlin about. I mean, is that the same thing?
Yes, I would assume that that's the same thing. Yeah. We're just expanding MOVE to actually have a true pediatric arm, pediatric.
It's a true pediatric study that's $3 to $4 million over 2 years. Yeah, this will be very robust and get our families positioned so that pediatrics, as Michaela said, can be considered in clinical trials. We also have 2 pharmaceuticals in particular, more really, but 2 whose drugs, whose therapy would work better in kids. And so they're very interested in pediatric cohorts, in pediatric registries, and that kind of thing, and the analysis therein. And they would come along about the time that we would have data from this pediatric study.
so you mentioned that you wanted 75 to 80 pediatric patients. If you only get 20, say, or 30, that probably wouldn't be enough to interest the pharmaceuticals, or wouldn't have enough data for the pharmaceuticals to move forward. Would you need, like, what is your number? Or what are they telling you is the number that they need to, no kidding, invest in treatments for pediatrics?
So some of the pharma companies that I've talked to were fine when I had given them a 30-patient pediatric proposal. Some of them, I think it will depend on the company. Maybe bigger isn't better, but I think that the kids with FSHD in general, as you know, they're very different from themselves. So that's why I think it's important to get as many of them as possible, because I think even the pediatric cohort itself will almost be split into 2, right? With the really young kids versus like the teenagers, and they're probably going to look very different. I think if I had to make up a magic number, which I'm literally making this up, I have not done any statistical analysis or power calculations, none of that. I think 50 is a great number to start with, but I'm saying 75 to 80 because you never know how long kids are actually going to stay in the study. You can't always make kids do what you want them to do, things like that. So I'm like, get 75 to 80 and then try to have like 50 that have really great clinical assessments. Maybe we can get them to do the MRI and muscle biopsy, but really I would like to get as many as I can, because the more numbers, the more powerful your study is. So, I mean, I'd be really happy with 20 or 30, but I'd like more.
I have a quick question for you. Can you hear me?
Mhm.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm not used to this whole head. So
Right.
anyway, my daughter's 3, and I have a question because on your slideshow you had 5 and up. Do you guys have like an age range that you guys really want to stick to, or is it just basically all?
It's a free for all, technically.
Okay.
So
Okay, that's
a lot-
good for us.
Yes, it is. A lot of sites actually were like, wait, you don't have an age limit, like not
Right.
younger, not older. I was like, no, we really technically don't. I'm not going to lie to you. Doing a 3-year-old, it might be a little hard.
Yeah.
The youngest one in our study is 5, which is why
Okay.
it starts at 5. But yeah, she would be allowed to enroll if you wanted.
We actually, Allie, I wanted to tell you this. I finally got an appointment for the Columbus, Ohio, for their move study. So April 4th. So we're really, really, really excited, and it wouldn't be possible without this. So thank you guys for doing this, because it touches me that I can do this for her, for my daughter. So I just want to let you guys know that good news. So
No, that's
hopefully
great news.
we'll get some more information for guys' study too.
Yeah. And so there is a site in Columbus. It's the Ohio State University, but we're actually going to be opening up a pediatric specific site in Ohio as well. And it's going to be at Nationwide Children's Hospital. So we'll go ahead and
Yeah.
get you enrolled at the Ohio State. But if you want to end up transferring her to Nationwide, that'd be
Okay.
fine too, because they are
Perfect.
a pediatric only center. But
Okay.
are you participating too?
She's actually the first one in the family. So she was mutated. So at least that's all we have so far with our genetics. My husband and I both were tested, and she ended up she's type 2, which I'm still learning about all that stuff. But as of right now, she's the only one. So in the family that has it. So. And I had a kind of question with that. I know that it gets mutated, but and it's not me or my husband, but she has 2 other siblings, would that be something that could technically happen with them if it's mutated with her? Is it just completely maybe a stupid question, but
Not a stupid question. It goes a little bit over my head. I would say probably technically yes. If they're not exhibiting symptoms, then they probably don't. I'm guessing they're older than her.
they are.
Yeah. Are they boys?
All girls.
All girls. That's a really tough call.
Yeah.
Especially because yes, theoretically, yes, your other kids could have a sporadic mutation just like your youngest does.
Yeah.
The question, I don't know. I don't know.
Jesse, we have the same situation in our household.
I know.
Type
Yeah.
2, and we were advised by the geneticist that it wouldn't affect our other child. For what
Okay.
that's worth.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Anecdotally, there are some there are some parents that have 2 kids and they don't have both kids have it, and neither parent have it, but that's type 1. So type 2, the geneticist might be totally accurate there, but it's rare. That's a rare thing, very rare.
I would say if you were really concerned about it, maybe do the spit test, just because it doesn't go through insurance or anything like that. And then you get like a I hate to say like a quick and dirty answer, but you do. And then it's not on their medical record. So you don't have to like start going down that battle. And then once you find out, then you can decide to go get a commercial test or go to a neurologist or something like that. But that way you have a little bit of peace of mind and you actually know. But then you're not actually getting it on their medical record and all of that stuff if they don't end up having it. Because then, you know, you don't want it to say muscular dystrophy and then they don't even have muscular dystrophy and it's still on there. So yeah, I would say maybe start with just the spit test for a peace of mind.
So Michaela, the other concern I get, mostly from adults, not necessarily pediatrics, but people are concerned. You mentioned that they couldn't enroll in the Move Plus if they were in a Fulcrum trial or another trial, but they can enroll in the regular Move if they're enrolled with Fulcrum or another trial, correct?
Correct.
Just not Move Plus? Okay.
Correct.
Just wanna make-
So with Move, we wanted it to go on for a really long time. Like I'm hoping this is going to go on for like 10 years. So we knew other pharma companies and other trials were going to come down the pipeline and we want our patients to be in the drug trials. So we weren't going to kick them out of our natural history study just because they went on a drug study, because hopefully everyone is going to get into a drug study and then we would have no one left. So we did decide to just let anyone, you know, stay in the study if they wanted. However, some pharma companies won't let you be in 2 studies at once. That's really, really common, which is okay. So, you know, you may have to choose to do one or the other. And in my position, I would probably choose the drug study, and that's okay too. So basically, we will keep you in the Move study as long as you're willing to participate. And then if you are on investigational therapy, we just wouldn't do Move Plus because I don't need to do an MRI or biopsy on you if you're getting a therapy, because it's probably going to look different than the other people with FSHD who aren't taking something.
And I had one more question. You mentioned for the MRI and the biopsy, that you had to be able to walk because you're concerned about taking a biopsy from a depleted muscle. A lot of times with FSH is asymmetrical. Like with my son, his left side is very strong, well, stronger than his right side. So he can't walk, but mostly because of his right side. So even if he had a strong left side that he could possibly take a biopsy from, he still would be exempted from the Move Plus.
And we might change this a little bit for kiddos, depending on, but yes, as of yes, right now, he would be, just because we are only letting people who are walking. But that's something we have discussed about changing. The biggest thing is we just want to make sure that there's enough muscle there to biopsy, is the big one. But I have had patients who are in a wheelchair and other kiddos with other muscular dystrophies and other studies, and they've done just fine. And they've been in, you know, a wheelchair since they were like 8, you know, and they did okay. And they haven't been walking since they were like 12. So, I mean, it's definitely something we've been able to do safely before. So
when will we learn about, you said the Move Plus opened up for pediatrics in 6 to 8 months. How will that word get out when it's like solidified and good to go? Like, how will we get the word out to parents that, yeah, the Move Plus is open and we're ready to tackle that?
this is where I really utilize my FSHD Society team members. But really, we usually put out a big bad press release. So we normally give first dibs to whoever the main funder is to let them put out the press release first if they want to. And then after that, then it's kind of a free-for-all, and we do a big press release through KU. I normally do an email blast through the society. I'll probably, reach out to my FSHD Canada and Solve FSHD folks. Probably going to be reaching out to, Raj in the UK. So really, I'm going to utilize you guys. I'm going to let my community friends know so that they can help me spread the word for the word of mouth. Because that's honestly the fastest and most effective way. And like even doing, these webinars and things, I'm like, really, you guys talking to each other is always the fastest way of learning new information. And I can post something on our website and our Facebook page, but it's not really nearly as impressive as the FSHD Society one.
Well, Michaela, when we get to that point, let's just stay in touch because, we'll do all we can to absolutely promote and push not only through our US avenues, but anywhere where you have patients. We've got through the World Alliance. There's lots of avenues where we can work together to make sure the word gets out, because I think making sure there's clarity around the distinction that, of what this study is, and the fact that they're going to be they're going to be measurements that are validated, that are related specifically to pediatrics. And there's a whole lot here to unpack in a really concise, clear way. So we'll probably want to do a blog post, have you on FSHDU. There's a lot that we'll want to do together to make sure that the word gets out, because we want it to fill and be successful, right? And we've been sort of beating the bushes on, the MOVE study and getting pediatrics enrolled. I mean, Allie's been, waving the flag and screaming from the mountaintops, for some time, and we're still not quite there. So I think it's going to take all of us using the power of our voices, posting about it when you're online, sharing it with everyone else that It's so important that we fill this study, that we get our number, that we got to get our cohort for pediatric patients. Because getting that information is critical to moving all of this forward for our younger patients. And so we got to all stay in the conversation. About the time we're all sick to death of talking about it, people out there will just barely start to register and get it. So maybe you and I, Michaela, could work on some talking points to just make sure we've got clarity, not just get your under 18, person with FSHD in the study, but why it matters. We've got to be able to get the why it's so important very succinctly. So let's maybe you and I work on what some of those talking points are, so that we can then provide them to all the parents and families and push those out on social, and push just so that there's some more clarity to the message.
I agree.
And I think the bottom line message needs to be, if we don't get the natural history, if we don't get the data on the kids, then the treatment is going to be delayed so much longer. We can't wait until there's a treatment to start doing this, because if they're not enrolled in MOVE and they don't get the data, then they're not going to get the treatment. And that's the bottom line. If we don't have the data, your kid is not going to get the treatment.
Yeah, it'll be severely delayed, because the adults will have been propelled forward and the kids will kind of been left behind because they won't have been defined at all.
And I think that's the misconception in the community, and that, once a drug is approved, it's going to be approved for everybody. And that's just not the case. And I don't think that message is getting out.
Yeah. And that goes for our type 2s. That goes for people who are, in a wheelchair. Yeah. Cheryl?
Hi. I know we talked at the conference, but can you confirm for me again the sites in Canada that are opening up? I think it was Montreal, Ottawa, and Edmonton.
Calgary.
Calgary.
Calgary. Yep.
Okay. So just, I don't know, you've probably done this already, but, make sure you engage with the new chapter directors there, right? Kathy and Jenny. And I know they're having a meeting coming up in March. So that'd be a good thing for them to announce, right? That it's opening. And
yep.
we don't have a chapter in Montreal, but Carrie's, and she's got a meeting coming up too in Ontario for Ottawa. So it might be good to tap them and make sure they bring it up at their meetings.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's a great suggestion. And that was kind of my hope, because we're going to have these sites, they should be activated by March, and they should be ready to be seeing patients by March. The Calgary site is a little bit further behind, because their doctor, he was on sabbatical and he just got back. So they'll probably be, I would think, sometime this summer.
Yeah. Okay.
Michaela, thank you so much. I think this was a really productive conversation. I can't thank you enough. Thank you all for attending. We just got to get the word out that we have to get our kids involved, or they're not going to get the treatment. And thank you so much for your time. Thank you all for attending. And Jesse, I wish I could, I'll give you a virtual hug. Thank you so much. I think the young kids, it's critical we get them involved, and thank you so much.
No, thank you, because I wouldn't have even known where to begin if I wouldn't have found this group. And I think I was going to touch on that really fast before we all left, is that being a mom who was thrown into the wolves, I felt like, and not know what to do with a little baby that you know, was trying for years to figure out what was wrong. And now you finally have this, like, this big word, right? And you're like trying to figure it all out. And then you're like, then you find this group, and it's like hard because I can't get on all the time, but it's such a blessing to have you guys come in and have Michaela, thank you so much. Like, that's everything you touched on was just every new mom coming to this group, or parent or grandparent, needs to hear that, because I feel like you're just lost. You don't know where to do or where to go. And without this group, I literally would have been lost. So everything you're doing, Allie, is literally such a godsend. Like, I cannot thank you enough for this wonderful group of people to communicate with. So you've helped my family a ton. So thank you. I just want to say that.
Thanks,
Quite
Jessie.
welcome. Yeah, that's why we're here. We're here to help each other, support each other, and cure this thing, you know, get our kids the treatment that they so desperately need.
Yeah.
But we need involvement, so thank you so much.
I still love your talk at the leadership summit, Allie, when you just got up there and said, I'm just a mom and I'm pissed off and I want to cure. And I think about that all the time. It's like, it's very simple. That's all we want. Yeah, we're all in the same boat.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you both very much. Well, all of you, and Allie and Michaela. Allie for hosting, and Michaela for being the guest speaker. I appreciate it very much. That was very interesting.
Thank you so much for having me, guys. I really appreciate it.
Okay.
Awesome.
Thank
everyone.
you.
Good night.
All right.
Have a good
See y'all
evening.
soon.
Good night.
Okay, bye.